In a kingdom covered by miasma at the end of the earth, home to monsters that once dominated and devoured mankind, a young girl is taken to the land, where she is presented to the king as the 99th sacrifice. The chancellor, Anubis, thinks that the girl is the scrawniest sacrifice they've been sent, saying she is not worth devouring, and suggests just tearing her apart. But the girl interrupts him, calling him a dog, and claiming that she is worth eating. The two begin to argue, but the king finds her intriguing, and orders Anubis to leave. He is left in the room with the girl, who calls him a short-tempered king, warning him that he'll be alone someday with that attitude. Her watchers, Sai and Klops, tell her to apologize to the king, who makes his way to her as he calls her impudent. The king reveals that every sacrifice before her has trembled in fear when presented to him, so he doesn't believe that the girl is not afraid of him, ordering her to beg for her life, as he wraps his hand around her head. But she just pokes at his paw pads, finding them soft and squishy. The girl claims that she doesn't have a family or a home, so she doesn't mind getting eaten. This sparks the king's interest, asking for her name, and she introduces herself as Sari. The king informs her that the sacrificial ritual will be held on the next night of revelation when the miasma clears, and he plans to keep Sari by his side until then, to see how long her bravado will last. After that, the monsters are surprised to see that Sari is walking around the palace. The officials become upset, asking Anubis if the king plans to keep a human pet in the palace, as they remind him that the late king made peace with the humans 100 years ago, but it requires the humans to send a sacrifice to symbolize that humans and monsters are not equals. As Sari looks out the window, the king grabs onto her, telling her that she didn't have permission to leave his room, so he carries her back. Sari tells him that his room looks boring, so she suggests putting some flowers in the room, but the king claims he doesn't like flowers, revealing that flowers don't even grow in that land because of the miasma. The king warns her that she will be killed by the other monsters in the palace if they see her, so she should do what he says, making Sari realize that the king is worried about her. The king grabs her by the neck, threatening to kill her, but the girl is not scared, claiming that she has seen worse. In a flashback, Sari learns that her name means sacrifice, so she goes to her parents, knowing that the next sacrifice is going to be from their village. At that moment, she overhears them talking about how they took her in to raise her as a sacrifice. Her parents notice her presence, and the room is illuminated by lightning as they stare at her. To this day, she still remembers the scary look in their eyes. And she tells the king that his eyes are different, so she is not afraid of him, and the king starts to take pity on her. They go to an old fortress city, which was damaged during their war with the humans 100 years ago. While the king is inspecting it, Sari sees the ruins of the lower town. The king explains that it's a lawless zone, where the monsters often cause trouble with humans, and it's his duty to stop that from happening. Sari sees flowers growing in the city, and the king explains that the miasma in the area is thin, so it's the only place in the land where flowers can grow. She takes some flowers from the garden, and puts a crown of flowers on the king's head, telling him that he looks adorable, but the king removes it, thinking that she is mocking him. Sari says that he always has a scary look on his face, so she wants to make the king feel better by making him look at the flowers. But the king grabs onto her, telling her that a storm is approaching. They head back to his room, where he tells her that the night of revelation is approaching. Lightning strikes, causing Sari to panic, because she remembers the look in her parents' eyes. The king covers her with his tail, so she won't panic when lightning strikes. Sari says that she is no longer scared, because the king is so warm, telling him that he doesn't need to act tough around her. On the night of revelation, they prepare Sari for the ritual of sacrifice, and she is happy because she gets to wear such beautiful clothes, thinking that it's like a wedding dress. Anubis escorts her to the altar chamber, where she will wait for the king's arrival, but she is ambushed by a lizard monster, who plans to overthrow the king. He thinks that killing her will help him with his goal, so he tries to attack her with his knife, but a cloaked man gets in his way, blocking the knife with his hand. The lizard thinks that he is an agent of the king, calling the king a coward, but Sari exclaims that they have a great king who prevents needless bloodshed. The lizard attacks again, slicing through the man's cloak and revealing his face. He disarms the lizard, pointing his sword against him and making the monster run away. Sari realizes that he is the king, but he points her to the exit as he explains that he is no king because he is actually half human, revealing that the night of revelation turns him into a human, so he has to hide in darkness until he turns back into a beast. The king feels bad, thinking that he is a pitiful weakling who is unworthy to be king, but Sari covers his wound, saying that he is not weak. Sari realizes that he didn't eat any of the past sacrifices, seeing that he has plenty of scars on his arms, and we learn that he used his own blood to make the other beasts think that the sacrifices were devoured during the ritual. She says that a weak person could never do that, so she calls him the strongest, saying that she wants to serve as nourishment for him instead of going home. Her chains break as the king hugs her, and the next day, the king informs everyone that Sari is going to be the queen. His subjects are not happy with this, so he challenges them to step forward, putting them in their place. Sari thinks about calling him Lanhart, which means brave-hearted, and he accepts it, saying he can live with that. Later, we see two officials begging him to reconsider his decision, because the queen should descend from a noble lineage, but the king scares them into submission. Sari is walking around the palace again, so Sayak and Klops warn her that the king will be mad again, but she isn't afraid of the king, because she knows he is actually a good person who is trying to protect everyone. At that moment, the king appears, lifting her off the ground, and taking her back to the room, where he tells her to wait quietly, but Sari wants to help him out, so he tells her to join the court banquet, where the nobles of the land will gather. The king reveals that his officials proposed it to him, thinking that it would change his mind about making Sari his queen, but he tells Sari to hold her head high. That evening, the king returns to his room, where he sees Sari sleeping by the window. He carries her, and she screams as she wakes up, apologizing for falling asleep while he was working. The king sees flowers on her lap, and she reveals that they are artificial flowers that she made to help him relax whenever he returns to his room. The king says he is not interested in flowers, but he thinks that artificial flowers suit him, because he is also a sham that has a lot to hide. Sari thinks that it doesn't matter if it's artificial, as long as it can touch people's hearts, and she tells him that he is like the bees that land on the flowers, because they are gentle and hard-working despite their scary appearance. She assures Lanhart that he is not fake, even wanting to be like him as she falls asleep. Guests from all over the land visit their castle, and Anubis tells Sari to behave herself during the event, seeing her as a hindrance to the king. They hold the banquet, where the guests are looking forward to seeing the new queen. Anubis tells them to stay silent as the king makes his entrance, but the guests are shocked as they see the king carrying Sari, mocking her appearance, and making rude remarks, since they look down on humans. The king demands silence, and Sari holds her head high, as Anubis tells the guests to enjoy the banquet. They sit on their thrones, but Sari notices the guests glaring at her, so she stands up and serves the guests some food, making everyone surprised. The guest tries the food, finding it delicious, and all the other guests start enjoying the banquet. Sari goes to the kitchen to help serve the food, but she encounters some monsters who don't want to let her enter, since she's human. Sai and Klops tell them that she is the queen, so their head chef lets her enter. She gets food from the kitchen, and even helps with cleaning the tables, but a chameleon monster still finds her suspicious. Sari sees a strange wine, which is said to be a gift from a trading city, so she takes it to the king, but the chameleon monster uses his tail to make her fall. She accidentally pours the wine on the king, and the chameleon condemns her, claiming that she did it on purpose. The guests stare at her, but the king licks her face and acts cool. He grabs the chameleon's tail, knowing that he used it to make Sari fall, and reminds him that Sari is his queen, and he threatens to kill him with his claws, but Sari stops him. Leonhard spares his life, telling him that he owes his life to the queen. After the banquet, Sari thinks about what happened, when the floor suddenly starts glowing around her. The king appears, and she grabs onto him, as a holy beast named Gwibber takes them to the air. They start flying away from the castle, and the king thinks that the gusty upper airs would make her feel better, and Sari is relieved, because she thought that the king was going to get rid of her, seeing herself as a burden. They land on the ground, and the king calls her a fool, telling her that she is already a part of him, so he won't get rid of her. She is worried that he'll end up hurting someone like the chameleon, but he is sure that she will stop him if something like that happens again. He tells her that he carries a heavy burden as a false king, and it's only when he is around her that he feels truly free, even saying that he can become a better king with her at his side, so he wants her to stay with him. Sari studies about the monster kingdom of Osmargo, thinking that she needs to learn about it, but she is having a hard time taking it all in. Anubis reluctantly agrees to teaching her because the king ordered it, but he thinks that he is just wasting his time, so he goes back to his other duties. Sari goes outside with Lanhart, as she wears a beast costume so she won't look too conspicuous. She sees his weird disguise, making her laugh because he looks too suspicious. They walk along a busy street, where she discovers how normal beasts live their lives, thinking that they aren't so different from humans. She sees a bakery, and she is happy to see some bread, saying there is no bread in the palace. The baker's family hears this, so they become suspicious, but the baker tells them that the king would never dress up as such a shady character. We learn that the royals and aristocrats took all the rarities under the last king, but the current king doesn't care about delicacies or fancy decorations, which is good for their bakery. They end up buying some bread, and Sari feeds it to Lanhart, who thinks that it's nothing special. As they eat bread, she hears a child monster named Bolus crying because he got separated from his mother. They help Bolus find his mother, but as they walk, Sari suddenly feels dizzy, so Lanhart takes Bolus from her as she wonders what is going on. Bolus starts crying, and Sari assures him that they will find his mother. His mother finally sees him, thanking Sari for her help, but as Bolus falls from the king's head, Sari catches her, revealing her human face to everyone. Bolus's mother suddenly acts hostile, telling her not to touch her child, as the other monsters make rude remarks just because she's human. They start throwing stones at her, so the king unleashes his aura, obscuring their vision, and disappearing with Sari. They return to the palace, where Anubis informs him about a report that a human was spotted in the city, but he ignores it, along with the other requests that are presented to him. Sari apologizes for all the trouble that she caused, knowing that she's scared all the townspeople. She notes that it is similar to how humans react to beasts, and she thinks that it's because the two races have a history of war between them. But she is convinced that both races don't like conflict. The king apologizes to her because he exposed her to danger, saying that he let his guard down, but he admits that he enjoyed his day with her. Sari tells him not to apologize, as she hugs him, telling him that she also had fun, but she suddenly blacks out. Anubis is talking to a priest, who reveals that Sari's health is declining because of the miasma, and it could eventually lead to her death. Sari tells the king not to worry about her, but the king knows that she can't stay in the kingdom. She later wakes up on a bed, seeing the blue sky, and she realizes that she is living with humans again. A doctor approaches her, informing her that she is in his clinic. She learns that she was brought in because of miasma poisoning, so they think that she must have come from the border, where the wind can blow miasma to their side. They give her medicine that's made from the ambrosia fruit, to help purify the miasma in her body. The assistant explains that someone left her unconscious in front of the clinic 3 days ago, with more than enough money for her treatment, as well as a note. Sari looks at it, recognizing the royal seal, but she can't understand what's written on it because it's in beast writing. However, it was enough for her to realize that the king saved her life. After that, Sari helps out at the clinic, while the assistant warns her not to force herself because she still hasn't recovered. She starts living peacefully in the town, and the assistant is happy with her performance, telling her that she can stay with them. Sari thinks about returning to the king, but she knows that she can't live there, because she will just make the king worried. The villagers start talking about her, and they learn that she came from the village that sent a sacrifice. They suddenly start shunning her, as they talk behind her back. She notices this, and she remembers how the monsters in the city acted hostile toward her, so she starts running back to the clinic. But when she reaches the clinic, she discovers that they have been attacked, and the doctor tells her to leave, because the townspeople think that she is a sacrifice that escaped from the beasts, fearing that the Beast King will destroy the town while searching for her. She starts wandering on her own, knowing that she has nowhere to go, so she starts crying, and she is about to fall down the cliff. But the king arrives in his human form, grabbing onto her in the nick of time. She asks him what he's doing there in human form, and the king reveals that he turns into a human whenever he's in the human realm, because there is no miasma. Sari thought that the king abandoned her, but he reveals that the letter states that he would come back for her. He gives her a ring with a crystallized ambrosia fruit, telling her that it will purify the miasma as it enters her body, so she can now stay with him. Sari returns to the palace, where Syat and Klops are glad to see her again. She wants to learn more about the kingdom, wanting to see its people with her own eyes, so she can stay by his side. Leonhard thinks that the ring will help her develop an immunity to the miasma, and tells her she can remove it after she becomes immune. But Sari doesn't want to remove it, mentioning what it means to give a human a ring. The king has no idea, and Sari says it's a promise to stay together forever. While walking around the palace, Sari encounters a princess named Vivian, who is there to ask for the king's hand in marriage. We learn that this was arranged by Anubis, saying Sari's appearance at the banquet was met with protests, so he is looking for a new queen to improve their relationship with their peers. More princesses arrive, and they are all there for the same reason. Vivian explains how they won't be able to face their countrymen if the king doesn't accept them, as concubines at least, before she walks away. That evening, Sari suggests granting the princesses an audience, but the king calls it a waste of time because he's not interested in keeping concubines, saying Anubis arranged this on his own. The king explains that concubines could be a threat to her position as queen, but Sari doesn't want to hold him back. The king becomes upset, saying they're done discussing the matter, and tells her to go to sleep. Sari hides in her watcher's room, where she wonders why the king was so worked up, because he doesn't normally lose his temper, so she thinks about returning to him. Meanwhile, Vivian enters the king's quarters, trying to seduce him into accepting her as a concubine, as she explains how the king can't make love with a human. Sari overhears this and enters the king's quarters, but she finds them in an awkward position, so she apologizes and runs away. The king gets upset, telling Vivian to leave, and Sari returns to her watcher's room, spending the night with them. The next day, they join the princesses at the dining table, but Vivian is nowhere to be found. The reptile princess named Amit accidentally drops her plate, so Sari cleans her up, accompanying her outside. While outside, Amit reveals she is afraid of the king, but she is there because reptilians face persecution. She is forbidden from returning home if she doesn't win the king's heart, so she has essentially been exiled. At that moment, they receive news that the royal guard has returned, and the guard captain Jorman enters the palace, wanting to meet the king immediately. He sees Sari, recognizing her as the queen, so he kneels before her, as he reveals he has sworn loyalty to the king. We learn that Jorman was once a commoner, but he rose through the ranks, managing to earn the king's trust. Amit is in love with him, revealing how Jorman used his royal guard's scarf to cover her wound in the past. She still has it with her, wanting to return it to him. She explains how he makes her heart race, and Sari thinks that the king makes her feel the same way. That evening, Sari is about to attend a banquet, but she sees Amit brooding in the corner, because her dress is ruined. The other princesses laugh at her, making Sari think they are the ones behind it. Amit wants to spend time with Jorman at the banquet, but thinks he's beyond her reach, so Sari removes her dress and lets her borrow it. Sari attends the event in her usual outfit, and Amit arrives wearing Sari's dress, returning Jorman's scarf to him and making him remember her. As Sari drinks from her cup, she sees Vivian glancing at her, and the drink causes her to black out. She later wakes up, but Vivian approaches her, grabbing her by the neck, as she asks Sari to make way for her to be queen. However, Sari comments that she wouldn't stand a chance, even if she isn't around. This makes Vivian furious, threatening to kill Sari with her claws, but Amit grabs onto her, telling Sari to run. Amit gets knocked down, as Vivian lunges at them, but the king saves them, telling her to never show herself again, as the guards take her away. The king apologizes for speaking harshly the previous night, while Anubis thinks about how the princesses were all sent home, unable to move the king's heart. But Amit stays behind, having received permission to stay as Sari's friend. The king tells Sari that she is the only woman he desires, and this makes her realize that she really is in love with the king. Jorman escorts Sari to a meeting, as he explains that Anubis will do anything to protect the king's throne, even if it means defying the king's will. At the meeting, Anubis receives Sari as their formal queen, saying he has considered the king's feelings, but he imposes certain conditions, saying Sari must become the most accomplished consort in history for the people to accept her. The first condition is to command a holy beast, because it's seen as a symbol of royal authority. This makes the king angry, because Sari has no magical power, so her life would be consumed instead, and she might also end up summoning a demon instead, which would lead to a fate worse than death. He ends the meeting, saying he doesn't need to entertain such a proposal. As they walk back to their quarters, Sari thinks there will be chaos in the kingdom because of her, but the king assures her that he will keep her safe. Sari watches Jorman as he trains the other soldiers, thinking about how everyone is doing their parts, so she wonders what she can do for the king. The next day, the king sees Sari putting her blood on the contract, so he asks her what she's doing. Sari states it's the right thing to do, saying she needs to win everyone's acceptance to protect him. She draws a sigil on the floor, trying to summon a holy beast, but she suddenly gets a bad feeling as her strength is drained away. This causes her to fall to her knees as the sigil blows her away because she stopped before finishing the incantation. She tries it again, but the spell fails, causing her to collapse. The next day, she tries again, drawing the magic circle, as Klops comments that she'll be in danger if she keeps failing, because a human shouldn't try summoning more than twice a day. She ends up failing again, and the king catches her in midair, ready to take her away, but Anubis stops him, explaining how the pledge forbids her from seeking aid. The king states he is not aiding her, but just granting her a brief rest, taking her back to his quarters. Sari claims she's fine, but the king knows she will die if she continues. Sari doesn't value her life, but the king calls her a fool as he explains he doesn't want to lose her. The next day, Sari tries to summon a holy beast again, and a flame comes out of the circle before she could finish her incantation. Anubis thinks she has summoned a demon, but Sari continues chanting as the flame surrounds her. The spell is successful, and a tiny beast appears in the circle. Sari collapses as the king compliments her for her performance. While Sari rests on the bed, they offer her some food, but her holy beast keeps eating everything, leaving nothing for her to eat. The holy beast explains he is the only one with the powers of immortality and rebirth, introducing himself as Bennu. He claims he was once the most beautiful holy beast in existence, calling himself a phoenix. Anubis arrives in the room, saying Bennu can't possibly be a phoenix, and Bennu tries to pick a fight with him. They can't understand what he's saying, and we learn that only the summoner can understand the holy beast. Anubis doesn't think the people will accept Bennu as the queen's holy beast, saying it needs to have a more regal form. Later, Sari wears a bird costume and tries to teach Bennu how to fly, but they aren't making progress, so Bennu decides to quit. Bennu reveals he has already used all of his powers, and we learn he was once overworked by the soldiers during a war. He says he'll never be able to fly again, but Sari tells him not to put himself down, saying he gave her so much confidence despite his current form. The next day, Sari sees Bennu trying to fly, as an assassin is targeting him. Bennu jumps off the castle wall, and it looks like he is about to fly, but an arrow almost hits him, causing him to fall. Sari dives after him, and he calls her an idiot for trying to save an immortal bird, but he is touched by her actions, and he awakens his powers, transforming into a real phoenix. Bennu reveals he will always come back if she believes in him, as he flies around the town, making everyone acknowledge him as a holy beast. At the palace gate, a guard is attacked by a mysterious man, saying he has business with the king of monsters. He ends up getting captured, and the king goes to him while he is chained in the dungeon. The man asks him if he killed Sari, but Sari happens to appear at that moment, recognizing him as Ilya. Ilya is happy to learn she is still alive, and Sari implores the king to pardon Ilya, saying she will accept his punishment instead. So the king claims that Ilya is his guest, and he only attacked because he didn't know how to ring the doorbell. The king wants to know about Sari's relationship with him, and in a flashback, we meet a young Ilya. As he is walking around the town, Sari goes to him, giving him some medicinal herbs, because he's always hurt. But Ilya says it's normal to get hurt, since he is training to become a warrior, and Ilya promises he will keep her safe, even from the beasts. Back in the present, Ilya is released from his chains, as Anubis tells him never to return to their realm. Sari arrives, and Ilya immediately grabs her hand, telling her he's taking her home, but Sai and Klops tell him that she is living with them now. Ilya kicks them away, wanting to leave with Sari, but she chooses to stay with the king. The king reveals that Sari is going to become his queen, ordering the guards to take Ilya away. Ilya grabs onto him, but collapses, and Sari worries about him. Anubis says it's because of fatigue, so the king allows him to stay overnight. They give Ilya some food, but he doesn't eat anything despite being hungry. He asks Sari if she's really going to become the queen, which she confirms, but Ilya tells her not to worry, because he plans to escape with her. Amit joins them in the room, offering Ilya some desserts, but he slaps it away, telling her to leave. Ilya wonders what's wrong with Sari, because she's too friendly with the beasts. He thinks the king will just toy with her, but Sari tells him that the king isn't like that, saying he is even willing to make sacrifices for humans. She tells Ilya she can't go with him, making him fall silent as she leaves to get more food. After she leaves the room, she is approached by Amit, who thinks she was too forward with Ilya. Sari claims Ilya is also kind, telling her about how Ilya wanted to protect her back when they were kids. Sari tells her that he just has a sore spot for beasts, but he isn't violent for no reason. The king sees Sari giving Ilya food, and Anubis comments on how she must find comfort in spending time with another human. She returns to Ilya's room, giving him his dinner, but Ilya doesn't talk, so she tells him that they may never be able to see each other again after he leaves. But Ilya knocks her unconscious, and he tries to escape with her. The king learns about this, and Ilya is now riding a horse back to the human realm. The king chooses to pursue Ilya himself, but Anubis suggests that maybe Sari chose to go with him, since they are both humans. The king starts to think that Sari could be happier in the human realm, but Amit implores the king to rescue Sari, knowing how much she loves the king. Jorman arrives, offering to take care of Ilya, but the king summons his holy beast, telling Jorman to take charge in his absence. As Gwibber tries to track Ilya, Bennu appears, offering to help them, because he shares his soul with Sari, so he knows her location. He guides them to his master, as Ilya reaches the hyena folk's territory, where his path is blocked by some monsters. They tell Ilya they will let him go, if he leaves Sari with them so they can eat her. But this makes him angry, so he attacks them, killing them one by one. One of the hyenas run, but Ilya catches up to him. The monster's son appears, begging him not to kill his father, but Ilya raises his sword, ready to strike them down. However, Sari grabs onto him, allowing the monsters to escape. Sari asks him why he would kill a child, but Ilya just sees all monsters as a threat to humans. Sari reminds him how he trained only to protect humans from monsters, but Ilya tells her it's not enough, thinking Sari is under a spell, so he thinks about killing monsters just to wake her up. He throws her on a bed, as he confesses his love to her, but Sari rejects him, telling him he is terrifying. She tries to tell Ilya that not all monsters are evil, and that the king has a kind heart, but he doesn't believe her, explaining how the monsters see humans as prey. In a flashback, we see Ilya with his sister Misha, who is afraid that the monsters will come for her, so Ilya promises to protect her from monsters. But one day, their mother returns to their house, making them hide in the closet, as she gets slaughtered by the monsters. The monsters find them, opening the cabinet, and they think about eating one of them for dessert. They take Misha away, eating her before his eyes, but they don't like how boys taste, so they decide to toy with him, letting him run away before they get him, but he ended up getting saved by his master. He saw a new ray of hope when he met Sari, but it was also taken away from him by the monsters. Back in the present, Ilya thinks about killing all monsters, tying Sari's hands to some wooden columns, as he tells her to watch him. At that moment, the king arrives, telling him to return Sari, but Ilya claims that Sari belongs to him. Ilya charges at the king, and they start fighting, as Bennu goes to Sari, telling her how Ilya is no match. Ilya knows this himself, but he refuses to back down, thinking the monsters will kill more humans if he does. He disappears before the king's eyes, pinning down his cape, as he jumps to strike him down, but the king unleashes his aura, blowing him away. Ilya still refuses to give up, telling the king to kill him, because he wants Sari to see how violent monsters are. He charges at the king, but the king allows him to stab him, saying Sari would be sad if he hurt Ilya. Bennu helps Sari get free, and she immediately checks up on the king, as she starts crying, while Ilya falls to his knees, realizing how he just made her upset. The king claims the wound is nothing to him, and Ilya starts questioning everything he has been doing. But Sari hugs him, telling him he has done so much for her, so he should forgive himself. Bennu heals the king's wound, and he transforms into a phoenix to transport Ilya, but he refuses to accept help from the monsters, choosing to go back alone. Ilya tells the king he has to give up Sari if he makes her cry, and the king gives him his word. Ilya ends up riding with Sari to return to the human kingdom, and Sari teases him for being afraid of heights. Ilya apologizes for acting so selfishly, and although he can never forgive the monsters, he decides to have faith in her belief in the king. He kisses her forehead, telling her he loves her, as they part ways. Sari flies back with the king, who tells her that he hesitated to bring her back because he thought she could be happier with Ilya, but Sari says she just wants to be with him no matter what. Back at the palace, Sari receives news that the Duke Gallius wants to meet her. She is excited to meet the Duke, but Anubis warns her not to take this matter lightly, saying she needs to play hostess to the Duke, and proposing this as one of her ordeals on her path to queenship. Ahmed is surprised to learn about this, and she recognizes Gallius as a legendary general known as the Sea God. She warns Sari that Gallius hates humans, so she advises Sari to be careful. Sari asks the king about Gallius, and he reveals that Gallius is known for his ruthless behavior, but the king assures her that he won't let Gallius harm her. Gallius arrives in the castle, as Anubis gives him a proper welcome, but Gallius tells him to skip the formalities, wanting to see the queen. Sari joins them,